In the bustling heart of Philadelphia, Dr. Alexander Thompson was a revered figure. At 44 years old, he had built a reputation as one of the city's most prominent and respected cardiologists. His dedication to his work and his compassionate bedside manner earned him the admiration of patients and colleagues alike. Alexander's charm and charisma extended beyond the hospital walls, making him a well-known figure in the community. He often spoke at medical conferences and community health events, where his expertise and eloquence left a lasting impression. His passion for medicine was matched only by his drive to constantly improve and innovate in his field. Isabella Thompson, Alexander's 40-year-old wife, was equally accomplished in her own right. Once a celebrated model, Isabella had graced the covers of numerous fashion magazines in her prime. Her striking beauty and elegant poise made her a favorite among designers and photographers. However, as she approached her 40s, Isabella transitioned from modeling to managing a high-end boutique in Rittenhouse Square. Her eye for style and her ability to curate exclusive collections made the boutique a favorite among Philadelphia's elite. Despite her professional success, Isabella often found herself reminiscing about her glamorous past and feeling somewhat disconnected from the present. Their life together appeared perfect on the surface. They lived in a luxurious townhouse in the upscale Rittenhouse Square neighborhood, surrounded by the trappings of success. The couple was known for hosting lavish parties and attending high-profile events. Their home was a testament to their refined tastes, adorned with artwork and furnishings that reflected their affluent lifestyle. However, beneath this veneer of perfection, their marriage was not as idyllic as it seemed. The passion and intimacy that had once defined their relationship had gradually faded, replaced by a growing emotional distance. Emily Parker, the 24-year-old nurse who joined Alexander's medical team, was a breath of fresh air in the otherwise high-stress environment of the cardiology department. Young, vibrant, and dedicated, Emily had quickly proven herself to be an invaluable asset. Her enthusiasm for her work and her genuine care for patients made her a favorite among staff and patients alike. Emily had always been ambitious, driven by a desire to make a difference in the medical field. Her journey to becoming a nurse was fueled by a personal experience with a family member's illness, which had instilled in her a deep sense of empathy and commitment. Emily's professional admiration for Dr. Thompson quickly evolved into a personal one. She looked up to him as a mentor, captivated by his knowledge and his ability to handle even the most challenging cases with grace and confidence. Their interactions, initially confined to the professional realm, began to spill over into more personal territory. Coffee breaks and lunchtime discussions revealed a shared love for literature and a mutual respect for each other's dedication to their work. Emily found herself drawn to Alexander, not just as a mentor, but as a man whose passion for life mirrored her own. For many years, Alexander and Isabella enjoyed a seemingly idyllic marriage. Alexander's career flourished, with Isabella often by his side at various social events and galas, her radiant presence complementing his professional stature. They traveled the world, dined at the finest restaurants, and lived a life filled with luxury and privilege. Despite not having children, they found fulfillment in each other and their shared passions. Their townhouse became a hub of activity, filled with friends, colleagues, and the occasional celebrity, all of whom were enchanted by the couple's charm and sophistication. As time passed, however, the once fiery passion between them began to wane. Alexander became increasingly absorbed in his work, often spending long hours at the hospital or attending medical conferences. His dedication to his career, while admirable, left little time for nurturing his marriage. Isabella, now managing her boutique, found herself feeling increasingly isolated and lonely. The glamour of her former modeling career had faded, and she struggled to find purpose in her day-to-day life. The couple's once vibrant social life dwindled, replaced by silent dinners and separate bedrooms. The arrival of Emily Parker marked a significant shift in Alexander's daily routine. At 24, Emily brought a youthful exuberance and a fresh perspective to the cardiology department. She had an infectious energy that brightened the often stressful atmosphere. Alexander, impressed by her competence and dedication, quickly formed a professional bond with her. They worked closely on numerous cases, their mutual respect and admiration growing with each passing day. Emily's presence became a source of renewed energy for Alexander, reminding him of the passion he had for his work when he was her age. Despite the growing distance in their marriage, Isabella remained unaware of the developing connection between her husband and Emily. Meanwhile, Alexander and Emily's interactions, while still professional, began to take on a more personal tone. Their conversations extended beyond medical discussions to more intimate topics, revealing a shared love for literature, travel, and fine dining. They often found themselves staying late at the hospital, discussing their favorite books, or planning hypothetical trips to exotic locations. Emily's admiration for Alexander grew, and she found herself looking forward to their time together, both inside and outside the hospital. As Alexander and Emily's connection deepened, the cracks in Alexander and Isabella's marriage widened. The emotional distance between them became more pronounced, with Alexander finding it increasingly difficult to balance his professional responsibilities, his growing feelings for Emily, and his commitment to his marriage. Isabella, sensing the growing disconnect, struggled to understand the changes in her husband. The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose the hidden truths and test the limits of love, loyalty, and betrayal. The emotional distance between Alexander and Isabella continued to grow, largely unnoticed by Isabella, who attributed it to the natural strains of a busy professional life. Meanwhile, the bond between Alexander and Emily strengthened, fueled by their frequent interactions and shared interests. Their relationship remained professional on the surface, but beneath that facade, a deeper, more personal connection was forming. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the hospital, Alexander and Emily found themselves alone in the break room. The hospital was unusually quiet, and the dim lighting created an intimate atmosphere. They began discussing a complex case they had worked on together, but the conversation soon shifted to more personal topics. Emily shared stories from her childhood, and Alexander opened up about the challenges he faced, balancing his demanding career and his strained marriage. As they talked, the boundaries between mentor and mentee blurred. Alexander found himself captivated by Emily's youthful enthusiasm and the way she made him feel alive again. Emily, in turn, was drawn to Alexander's wisdom and the sense of security he provided. The attraction between them was undeniable, and that night they shared their first kiss. It was a moment of weakness, a brief lapse in judgment that would have far-reaching consequences. From that point on, their relationship took on a new dimension. They began meeting outside of work, under the guise of discussing cases or attending medical conferences. Each rendezvous brought them closer, their feelings growing stronger with each encounter. Emily became a source of solace for Alexander, a refuge from the pressures of his professional and personal life. For Emily, Alexander was not just a mentor, but someone who understood her ambitions and dreams. As their affair intensified, the risk of discovery increased. They took greater precautions, meeting in secluded spots and communicating through private channels. However, the more they tried to conceal their relationship, the more it consumed them. Alexander struggled with the guilt of betraying his wife, while Emily wrestled with the ethical implications of their affair. Despite their best efforts, their clandestine meetings did not go unnoticed forever. Isabella, though initially oblivious, began to notice subtle changes in her husband's behavior. He was more secretive, often distracted and distant. Their conversations grew shorter, and his excuses for late nights and weekend absences became more frequent. Isabella's intuition told her something was amiss, but she hesitated to confront Alexander directly. She feared the truth, whatever it might be, could shatter her already fragile sense of security. One afternoon, Isabella decided to visit the hospital unannounced. She brought lunch for Alexander, hoping to surprise him and perhaps rekindle some of the intimacy they had lost. As she approached his office, she overheard voices. Peeking through the slightly ajar door, she saw Alexander and Emily locked in a tender embrace. Her heart sank, and a wave of betrayal and anger washed over her. Isabella quickly left the hospital, her mind racing with the implications of what she had just witnessed. The discovery of the affair marked a significant turning point for Isabella. The pain of Alexander's betrayal was unbearable, but beneath the hurt, a simmering anger began to take hold. She realized that her marriage, which she had once thought unbreakable, was built on a foundation that had been eroding for years. The perfect life they had presented to the world was nothing more than a facade. Isabella's first instinct was to confront Alexander, but she knew she needed to approach the situation with caution. She wanted to understand the full extent of the affair and gather evidence before making any decisions. Over the next few weeks, Isabella quietly observed Alexander's behavior, noting his secretive phone calls and unexplained absences. She hired a private investigator to follow him and document his activities. The evidence she collected confirmed her worst fears. Alexander and Emily were deeply involved in an illicit relationship. Armed with this information, Isabella began to plot her next move. She decided to confront Emily first, hoping to appeal to the younger woman's sense of morality and perhaps persuade her to end the affair. Isabella arranged to meet Emily at a coffee shop near the hospital. Emily, unaware of Isabella's knowledge, agreed to the meeting, thinking it was a routine discussion about hospital matters. When they met, Isabella's calm demeanor belied the storm of emotions raging within her. She confronted Emily with the evidence of the affair, demanding an explanation. Emily, caught off guard, stammered through an apology, trying to justify her actions. Isabella's composure began to crack as she listened to Emily's excuses. She realized that Emily was not just a willing participant, but someone who had actively pursued a relationship with her husband. The meeting ended with a tense standoff. Isabella made it clear that she would not tolerate the affair any longer and that she expected Emily to end it immediately. Emily, shaken by the confrontation, reluctantly agreed. She promised to cut off all contact with Alexander, hoping to avoid further conflict. However, deep down, she knew that ending the affair would be more complicated than simply walking away. Isabella's next step was to confront Alexander. That evening, she waited for him to return home. The atmosphere in their townhouse was thick with tension as she laid out the evidence of his betrayal. Alexander, realizing he could no longer deny the affair, admitted to his indiscretions. He tried to explain, to justify his actions by citing the emotional distance that had grown between them. But Isabella was beyond listening. Her hurt and anger were too overwhelming. The confrontation left their marriage hanging by a thread. Alexander promised to end the affair and rebuild their relationship, but Isabella was unsure if she could ever trust him again. She felt trapped, torn between her love for the man she had married and the betrayal that had shattered her world. The once unbreakable bond between them was now fragile and fractured, with no clear path to reconciliation. As days turned into weeks, the tension in the Thompson household grew unbearable. Alexander ended his relationship with Emily, but the damage was already done. Isabella's trust was irreparably broken, and Alexander struggled with the guilt of his actions. Emily, dealing with her own heartache, found it difficult to move on, knowing she had been a part of the destruction of a marriage. The affair, once a secret source of passion and excitement, had become a catalyst for pain and turmoil. The lives of Alexander, Isabella, and Emily were irrevocably changed, setting the stage for a climax that would determine the fate of all involved. The months that followed the confrontations were a tumultuous period for all involved. Alexander and Isabella continued to live under the same roof, but the atmosphere was fraught with tension and unspoken resentment. They attended marriage counseling, desperately trying to salvage their relationship, but the wounds were deep, and healing seemed an insurmountable task. Isabella's trust in Alexander was shattered, and despite his genuine efforts to make amends, she could not forget the betrayal. Emily, on the other hand, found herself isolated and heartbroken. The affair had cost her dearly. She became the subject of gossip among hospital staff, and her professional reputation suffered. She tried to focus on her work, but the shadow of her relationship with Alexander loomed over her every day. She considered leaving the hospital, but finding a new job in her field was challenging, and she felt trapped by the consequences of her actions. Despite their efforts to distance themselves from each other, fate had other plans. Alexander and Emily were scheduled to attend a medical conference in New York, a commitment made months before the affair had come to light. Alexander, believing it would be unprofessional to back out, decided to go, and Emily too felt obligated to attend. Isabella, unaware of the conference, continued to navigate the emotional minefield of their marriage, hoping for a resolution. The conference was held at a prestigious hotel in Manhattan. On the first evening, after a long day of seminars and networking, Alexander and Emily found themselves alone in the hotel bar. The familiar tension between them was palpable, and despite their attempts to remain professional, the emotional and physical attraction they shared resurfaced. They talked, initially about work, but soon the conversation turned personal. They reminisced about the moments they had shared, the passion that had once burned so brightly between them. As the night wore on, they both realized that their feelings for each other had not faded. The temptation to rekindle their affair was overwhelming. Torn between desire and duty, they simply couldn't resist to enjoy themselves one more time. However, this decision would be the catalyst of a tragedy nobody could have predicted. Back in Philadelphia, Isabella had stumbled upon the conference itinerary while cleaning Alexander's office. The realization that he would be spending time with Emily, despite his promises, sent her into a spiral of rage and despair. The betrayal was too much for her to bear, and she felt consumed by the need for retribution. She booked a last-minute flight to New York, her mind racing with thoughts of confrontation and revenge. Arriving at the hotel, Isabella felt a surge of adrenaline. She knew that her actions were driven by pain and anger, but she felt justified in her quest for justice. She went to the front desk and, using her charm, managed to find out which room Alexander was staying in. She took the elevator to the 15th floor, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. When she reached Alexander's room, she hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She knocked on the door, and when Alexander opened it, his shock was evident. Before he could say a word, Isabella pushed past him into the room. The sight of Emily's belongings, a suitcase and a pair of shoes, confirmed her worst fears. The confrontation was explosive. Isabella's fury erupted as she accused Alexander of continuing the affair. Emily, hearing the commotion, arrived at the room to find Isabella and Alexander locked in a heated argument. The sight of Emily pushed Isabella over the edge. She felt a white-hot rage, and in a moment of blind fury, she grabbed a knife from her purse, a tool she had brought in a fit of madness, and lunged at Emily. The attack was swift and brutal, fueled by months of pent-up anger and betrayal. Alexander, in a desperate attempt to protect Emily, was caught in the fray. The scene was chaotic, filled with screams and the sounds of struggle. The hotel staff, alerted by the noise, called the police. By the time they arrived, the room was a scene of carnage. Emily lay on the floor, fatally wounded, and Alexander was gravely injured, struggling to breathe. Isabella, covered in blood and in a state of shock, was quickly subdued and arrested. The aftermath of the violent confrontation was devastating for all involved. Emily succumbed to her injuries before reaching the hospital, her life cut short by a moment of uncontrollable rage. Alexander, though critically injured, survived the attack. His recovery was long and arduous, marked by physical pain and deep emotional scars. The affair that had once been a source of excitement and passion had ended in tragedy, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Isabella faced the full weight of the law for her actions. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and she was charged with murder and attempted murder. The trial was highly publicized, drawing attention from the media and the medical community. Isabella's defense team tried to argue that she had been driven to madness by the betrayal and emotional torment she had endured, but the jury was unswayed. She was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in prison. The scandal rocked the Philadelphia medical community. Alexander, once a respected doctor, found his career in tatters. Although he was not directly responsible for the violence, the affair and its consequences led to his resignation from the hospital. He moved away from Philadelphia, seeking a fresh start in a new city where he could rebuild his life away from the memories of his past. The hospital where they had all worked implemented stricter policies on workplace relationships, hoping to prevent similar incidents in the future. The story of the deadly love triangle served as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences that can arise from deception and betrayal. In the end, the affair that had begun with a spark of forbidden passion ended in unimaginable tragedy. The lives of Alexander, Isabella, and Emily were irrevocably altered, each paying a heavy price for their choices. The once prominent doctor and his nurse, whose illicit relationship had seemed so full of promise, were now remembered only for the violence and heartbreak that had shattered their lives and those around them.